Hey there, Cryptid family. If you enjoy the chills, don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you're new, and hit that notification bell if you're not afraid of the whispers. The air in Black Harbor was thick with the stink of fish, salt, and something worse, something rotting beneath the waves. The town itself looked as if it were sinking into the coastline, its buildings leaning at odd angles, weather-beaten and grim. The people weren't much different. They moved quickly, heads down, shoulders hunched against the wind, eyes flicking toward the sea as though expecting it to reach out and pull them under. I walked down the creaking docks, my boots slick with seawater and something darker. The fishing fleet rocked against the piers, their hulls scarred, not just from time, but from something else. Deep gashes ran along the wood, the kind that didn't come from jagged rocks. I was here because the ocean had been giving back its dead. At first, the bodies came every few months. A fisherman lost at sea, a storm-swallowed boat. But now it was every week. And they weren't just drowning. They were coming back empty. No lungs, no organs, just a husk of skin and bone, left perfectly intact, except for their eyes wide open, like they had seen something at the very end. The locals called it the Drowned King. I had heard legends before, but nothing like this. I stopped in front of the harbor master's shack, where a hunched old man sat on a wooden crate, sucking on a cigarette like it was his last breath. His face was carved from years of sea and wind, his left eye cloudy with an old wound. He watched me approach, but didn't speak. "You lost someone?" I asked. He let out a low, humorless chuckle. "We all lost someone." I pulled a crumpled photograph from my jacket. One of the victims, a fisherman named Roy Ellis, who had washed up just 3 nights ago. "You knew him?" His eye flickered to the picture before he spat into the water. "Knew him. Drank with him last week." His gaze settled on me. "Roy went out the next day, said he heard something." "Heard what?" The old man licked his lips, glancing toward the horizon. The tide was rolling in fast. The water shouldn't be that high yet. "The call," he said. "It starts as a whisper, a voice in the waves. Ain't like a normal sound. It's in your head. Tells you to come closer, to step into the water." He shook his head. "Ain't nobody can fight it." I tucked the photo away. "Then why aren't you dead?" His cigarette burned low between his fingers. "I don't listen." Something shifted beneath the surface of the harbor. A deep, rolling motion, not a wave. The boats groaned, shifting against their ropes. The harbor master stiffened. "Tide's moving wrong," he muttered. I turned toward the water, just as a fishing boat lurched sideways, the deck tilting as if something was pulling it down. Then the screaming started. A man burst from the cabin, his coat flapping as he stumbled toward the railing, eyes wild with terror. He clawed at his face, his mouth moving soundlessly before he froze. And then He stepped off the boat. Not jumped, stepped. I ran toward the dock's edge, but by the time I got there, he was already gone. The water swallowed him whole. No splash, no struggle. He simply disappeared beneath the waves. The harbor went dead, silent. The air was thick, charged. The gulls had vanished. Even the wind had stilled. And then, from the depths of the sea, I heard it. A voice, whispering my name. I pulled my rifle off my back. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The whisper had no direction, no source. It was simply there, wrapping around me like cold seawater. I kept my rifle steady, scanning the harbor. The tide was rising too fast, swelling against the docks, creeping up over the wooden planks like it wanted to pull the town under. The fishing boat, where the man had vanished, rocked violently, its mooring ropes straining as if something below was tugging at it. No one moved. The harbor master had gone pale, his cigarette burnt to the filter between his fingers. The other fishermen stood frozen, their faces twisted in that quiet, paralyzing fear of men who had seen something they could never explain. I knelt at the dock's edge, staring into the dark, churning water. The waves rolled slow, rhythmic, too controlled, too deliberate. The ocean was moving, but it wasn't just the tide. Something was breathing. Then the body surfaced. It drifted up slowly, face down, arms spread. Water streamed from its clothes in slow rivulets, pooling around its slack fingers. The current should have carried it further out, but it didn't move. It just floated there, waiting. A long, gurgling breath bubbled up from beneath the body. Then it rolled over. I've seen a lot of dead things in my time, but this wasn't like any corpse I'd ever found. The fisherman's eyes were wide open, unblinking, his pupils dilated and empty. His skin was bloated, but unmarked. Not a scratch, not a bruise, but his lips moved. He was mouthing something. I leaned closer, watching, trying to make out the words, and then his eyes snapped toward me. I fired. The shot echoed across the water as the body sank instantly, yanked down like something had grabbed it from below. The dock shuddered. The waves swelled violently, sloshing over the wood, soaking my boots. A deep, guttural groan rippled through the air, like the sound of 1,000 voices speaking in unison, choked by water. Then the boats lurched. One by one, they tilted violently, as if the ocean itself had reached up and wrapped invisible hands around them. And then I saw it. Through the foaming waves, a shape began to rise. It wasn't just big, it was impossible. A towering mass of rotting flesh and barnacle-encrusted limbs, humanoid in the vaguest sense, but grotesque, wrong. Its chest cavity gaped open like a deep-sea predator's mouth, seawater spilling from within, and its eyes, Its goddamn eyes were glowing from deep within its skull, two molten orbs of sickly, pulsing light. A voice, 1,000 voices, pushed into my head, whispering, warbling, drowning me in sound. You were called. You must answer. The dock buckled as the tide surged upward, the water rushing toward me. I braced myself, gripping my rifle, aiming straight at its head. The harbor master's voice rang out behind me, desperate, broken. You can't kill the sea, boy. The creature's gaping mouth yawned wider, black tendrils unfurling from its ribs, reaching toward me. I fired again. The bullet hit, lodging deep into its bloated, waterlogged skull. And it just kept coming. The bullet sank into its skull with a wet, meaty squelch. The drowned king barely reacted. Its glowing eyes flickered for a moment, its massive form still rising from the water, barnacles cracking off its flesh as it pulled its hulking body onto land. A tidal wave followed it. Water crashed over the docks, smashing into boats and swallowing the planks whole. I barely had time to leap onto a crate before the tide ripped the lower half of the pier apart, dragging wooden beams and fishing nets into the abyss. The creature took another step, its weight making the earth tremble beneath my boots. It was on land now, no longer confined to the depths, and it was still whispering, 1,000 voices, all speaking at once, all calling my name. They weren't words anymore, just sound, a droning, choking noise that made my lungs feel like they were filling with water. I gritted my teeth and pressed forward, wading through ankle-deep seawater, my hands moving fast as I grabbed the detonator from my belt. I had one shot. The fishing vessel at the far end of the dock was my only plan. I had spent the last few hours before sundown rigging it to blow. I'd packed its hull with explosives from the town's old whaling station, stacking them deep into the rusted belly of the ship. It was supposed to be a last resort. Now, it was my only resort. I turned and ran, sprinting through the waterlogged dock, my boots slipping as the waves churned against the wood. The drowned king let out a deep, guttural howl, its voice warped and thick with seawater. Behind me, the air crackled as the sky darkened. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The whispering was inside my head now. I felt it crawling into my skull, into the spaces behind my eyes, the places where fear lived. My breath hitched as I felt my legs slow. My body wanted to stop moving. It wanted to listen. Just let go. Step into the water. I bit down hard on my tongue, the pain snapping me back to reality. I forced my legs forward, fighting through the thick, rising tide, the ship looming just ahead. One chance, one shot. I reached the fishing vessel and scrambled onto the deck, my hands shaking as I stumbled toward the detonator switch. The boat was already sinking, dragged lower into the ocean by something beneath it. The explosives were set. All I had to do was hit the switch. The drowned king was only steps away now, its shadow swallowing the dock. Its chest cavity was open, a massive yawning abyss of rotting flesh and writhing tendrils. The voices swelled, pressing down on me like deep water. I gripped the detonator. Not yet. Wait. I watched as the drowned king took its final step, right onto the shipwreck. The waves surged upward, trying to pull me under, but I held on, my body screaming for air as I slammed the switch. The explosion detonated beneath me. The shockwave tore through the ship, splitting it apart as a column of fire and water erupted into the night sky. The impact hit the drowned king first, tearing into its gaping chest cavity, ripping its bloated form apart like a corpse left too long in the sun. It screamed. It was a sound I will never forget. Not words, not voices, just pain. The ocean reeled back, as if the sea itself was rejecting the dying creature. Its twisting limbs flailed, its tendrils shriveling, its body caving inward, collapsing into itself as the weight of the blast dragged it back down. And then, just like that, the water swallowed it whole. I woke up on the shore. The tide had receded, the sea now eerily still. Pieces of the destroyed dock and burnt ship hull washed up around me, blackened and broken. The night was silent. The drowned king was gone. I dragged myself upright, every muscle screaming in protest. The town was watching from a distance, fishermen huddled in doorways, too afraid to come closer. I turned my hands over, staring at my skin. My fingers were still wrinkled from the salt water, but the barnacles that had started growing on my arm were gone. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I did know one thing. The sea never forgets, and one day it would call again.